Okay, so good afternoon. Thank you for joining. My name is Allison Foster, and I'm going to walk you through part one of a couple of trainings that we're going to provide. So I first want to say thank you for volunteering to help redevelop the AS-PPH CPH study guide. It's kind of a big project, and so we have a lot of changes going on. It needed to be refreshed anyways, but given the change to the content outline, it's a pretty substantial project. So we definitely need lots and lots of ideas. You're the content expert, so we really need as much help as we can get. So I just want to say thank you, and hopefully it's actually going to end up being a fun project. Item writing itself is pretty interesting, so we'll try to make this fun as well. So what I'm going to do, so like I said, you're not on mute, but if you all want to ask questions, but it's not, you don't want to jump in, feel free to use the chat box, and we can take a pause and answer questions. So I'm going to go ahead and go through some basics. So I'm going to give you a little context for the CPH before we actually look at the content outline. Okay. So the CPH, so as with any certification body, we have certain criteria that we have to meet in order to be recognized as a certifying body. And with ours, so we have eligibility criteria, and we're going to talk just a tiny bit about that because it is going to give you context when you're thinking about at what level should study guide materials be developed. So we do have a couple criteria for eligibility. And anybody who's found eligible does have to pass the CPH exams. Everybody sits for the exam. There's no such thing as grandfathering in credentialing world. And then we also have a maintenance of certification process. So folks do have to recertify every 2 years. So the eligibility. So one route to eligibility, there's three, is all alumni of CEEP accredited schools and programs of public health. So it doesn't matter what their degree was, what area of study. If they have a degree from a CEEP accredited school or program, they are eligible to sit for the CPH exam. And students are also eligible. And in the next week or so, we're going to be updating all our materials. We've started to do so. We're actually changing the eligibility for students. And this is very relevant to this conversation today because you see previously the criteria has been graduate students who have completed or concurrently enrolled in the following courses. Well, because of the changes to CEEP accreditation criteria, these courses may not exist at all institutions. They might. I mean, I think institutions can have degrees in these areas and offer these individual courses, but we think that there are going to be some schools and programs that don't offer a course in fill in the blank, and therefore we had to update our eligibility. So what we have revised it to say is that the schools and programs will make the determination of eligibility based on their implementation of their foundational core. So that means that students, if they're enrolled, will be able to sit for the CPH exam. Okay. And then lastly, this is in one of our newer eligibilities. So anybody who has at least a bachelor's degree in any field, does not have to be public health, but any field, they've finished college, and they have at least 5 years work experience in public health, will be able to sit for the exam. And so this does influence the way that we think about writing questions in the study guide materials, because these individuals in particular haven't taken the formal courses necessarily. Okay, so the exam and the study guide is all about preparing individuals for the exam. So the exam itself is 200 questions, and candidates get 4 hours to take the exam. No questions on the exam require calculators or scratch paper, and this is relevant when it comes to biostatistic questions, so they don't have to actually do any calculations. And then all questions are multiple choice and single best answer. Okay. And this just to give you an idea of a couple of changes that have happened since I have a captive audience right now, is we now test all year long. We no longer have testing windows. so 12 months a year. So we do have a lot of candidates from schools and programs still, even though we have work eligibility, and part of that is because, and this personally was a surprise at how quickly it took off, but over time we now have 10 schools and programs who are requiring their public health students to take the exam before they can graduate. And some of these, they require the students to pass the exam before they graduate, which is a whole other story, but at least these 10, they have to at least take the exam. And so still, because it's a pretty significant number, and some of these are larger programs, a lot of our candidates are through the student eligibility. Some of this. We now have instant scoring, which is great. Candidates do not have to wait that agonizing 4 to 6 weeks to find out if they pass. They find out as soon as they finish their exam. And we now offer digital badging, and this really just provides motivation in the recertification process. So the more recertification activities they report, they earn badges in their portal. And then lastly, we also now have digital certificates. They still get, everybody who passes still gets a certificate in the mail, but they also get a digital certificate. And what's really nice about this is if you think about how many people walk into your office, it's a pretty limited number, but you think about how many people you interact with online in LinkedIn and your email signature, et cetera, and this is basically just a digital certificate that you can share. Okay, so kind of gives you a little background of where the CPH is. So let's talk about the content outline. So this has been the map, basically. And I know a couple of you have been item writers, so this should look really familiar to you. This is what we test on. Now, within each of these core areas, there are lots and lots and lots of sub-items, but I could not fit that on the slide. It's very long. But so these are the major categories. So you can see there's 12% of the exam is on general principles, and then 75% of the exam, 30 items each, are on the 5 core areas, and then we have another combined domain, it's 12% of the exam on the cross-cutting areas. And this has pretty much been the map to the exam for quite some time. So why is the content outline changing? So 2 reasons. One, the National Board realized that in order to become accredited, and that's always been a goal, to be accredited by one of the accrediting bodies for certification agencies, is that their requirement is that the entrance exam must follow a job task analysis process. You have to test on the results of a job task analysis. And in the case of the current CPH exam, that wasn't the case. And I won't go into how the content outline was developed, but it did not follow a job task analysis. And the other reason why is there's always been a deep desire on the part of the board to be relevant to the practice of public health. That is, after all, why folks go to school and to get a public health degree. And you know, certainly practice in public health is really what credentialing is all about. It's supposed to be credentialing the workforce. And so it was very important to the board to understand that what we're testing really is relevant to the practice of public health. So a couple of years ago, I think it was actually 2014, the National Board put together a committee, and it was primarily practitioners from health departments and NGOs, federal agencies, to put together a work group, and they formed the basis of a job task analysis. And many of you know this, probably better, you've probably worked with many job task analysis, but in case anybody doesn't, a job task analysis is a survey instrument that finds out what people are actually doing in public health. You know, not what should they be doing and what do they know, but what are they actually doing in their job. Okay. And so this advisory committee spent a good, it was almost close to a year putting together the survey instrument. It was a huge job. So they started with a literature review, and we brought them together in person, and they just kind of hashed through, you know, big picture, what is happening in public health, what do people do in public health from their experience, We looked at other credentials if they were a resource. We looked at job descriptions. We looked at just about everything. So this is what they came up with from the get-go. This is not where we are now, but this is where they started. They said this, we think, would be a framework for a job task analysis survey. And you can see just from this slide, it's already pretty different than what the current content outline looks like. You don't really see the 5 core areas in here as clearly. I mean, they're in there, but it's quite different. So after, like I said, after about a year, the survey went out. It was a very long survey. It has to be. It's such a broad field, and people do so much in public health. And we asked all respondents, how often do you perform this task? So this is really important here. Is our new content outline is based on tasks, not topics, not knowledge, on tasks. And so are these particular tasks that went through every single one important to your job, not important, essential, et cetera? We were really happy. We got a great response rate to the survey because it took a long time to fill out. So I was just thrilled that this many people would even make an attempt to fill it out. We had some folks that we had to disregard their responses. They either didn't get far enough through, or they were current students, or they were currently unemployed, and we just weren't allowed to include those. So we ended up with almost 5,000 usable survey responses, which is great. So we had lots of information, 5,000 survey responses, 200 task instrument. So then we spent a good year just doing analysis, and trying to poke holes in it, trying to figure out where it didn't capture something, where it looked like it was skewed, just trying to make sure that we didn't miss anything really major. So we went through a whole series of processes, and I'm just going to give you a little idea of what we did. So we just looked at the raw results, and this is just a sampling. I've got tons of them, but for example, we looked at the domains, not the individual tasks, but just the domains overall, and how the tasks within each of those domains rated. And I thought it was kind of interesting that ethics had the highest rating, highest average rating for its tasks. You can see how these stacked up. Okay. So then we presented and presented and presented and presented, and I keep meaning to put together a slide that shows how many conferences we went to and how many webinars, got in front of every group you could think of. I mean, we presented to the nurses and the veterinary public health association and to the health departments, and anybody who would give us 15 minutes or more. We wanted to find out, how did they feel about it? Was it reflective of what they did? So we continued to do analysis by sector, by setting. So this slide just shows each of the domains is color-coded, and so we looked at how the domains rated as folks moved along in their careers. And so, I'll just give you one example. You see the entry level in the middle, and then it goes to mid and upper. So theoretically, those people, as they move throughout their career, how do the domains shift around in terms of priority? And so we kind of heard this a few times, is that ethics, if you look at ethics under entry, ethics is the second most important for entry level, and then for mid it becomes the third, and then upper it becomes the fourth. And does it mean that people become less ethical as they move up through their career? But what we finally concluded is it's not that it became less important, that other things kept getting shoved up to the top as they just took on more and more throughout their career. But you get the sense, we actually had these, I would say, very meaningful conversations, just trying to make sure that it felt right, that we felt good about what we'd done. So here, just another example, this just shows the tasks, not the domains, but the top rated tasks, and the average score and the standard deviation. And I think this slide's particularly useful because you can see what an actual task looks like. In our current content outline, like for biostatistics, we'll have chi-squared or t-test. They're topics. This is actually something that people do. The tasks look very, very different. So the number one task, for example, was collect valid and reliable quantitative, qualitative data. Number two, use of informational technology for data storage, collection and retrieval. Okay, so we looked at these and just to get a sense of kind of where this was going. Then the next step was we brought the committee back together and looked at the actual ratings of every task. And there were some tasks that they were very important to some people, not important to the majority. And so we had to take that out because the exam really should be comprehensive. We had a couple tasks that once we stood back a little bit and took a break and came back and looked at it, we realized a couple tasks were very, very similar. And we're not supposed to change the tasks in a job task analysis process, but they were just very, very, very close together. So we felt comfortable consolidating a couple of tasks. And so we went through a couple of processes to make sure that the tasks that remained, that would be the foundation for the new CPH exam, were relevant. And so what we ended up with we eliminated about 50 of the 200 tasks. I think it's actually 160, but close to that. Okay, so through this process, the revision process, we kind of fiddled with the tasks, and we consolidated, we eliminated, we realized our domains were different because we changed the tasks within the domain, so we did a factor analysis. And again, a lot of you probably do this, you know, and so no factor analysis. But in case any of you don't, factor analysis looks at the responses among respondees and looks for similarities, and basically put the tasks into buckets so that there was similarity between the tasks across the domains. And so just put all the tasks in different buckets. And when we went and looked, it really reshuffled things that some we weren't expecting at all. Some made a lot of sense. So we had these buckets, and then we had to go back and rename them. And they didn't really fit anymore with the original domain names. So we spent some time talking about what should we even call these. So we knew what we had. We knew the content outline, but we just didn't know what to call the buckets. So after we did a lot of calls to try to make sure that the domains resonated, because a lot of times it's the first thing that somebody's going to see is the domain names. And so this is what we ended up with. So again, quite different than our current content outline. So evidence-based approaches to public health, communication, leadership, law and ethics, program management, program planning and evaluation, collaboration and partnership, public health biology, and human disease risk. I need to put that word disease back in there. Policy in public health, and health equity and social justice. So that is what the domains of the new content outline are going to look like. But we'll look at the actual content outline in a moment. Okay, but again, quite different than where we started, so pretty interesting. Okay, so as we were working on this, we realized, you know, there's a lot of similarity here with some other bodies of work that we know are out there. And so we actually lined our new domains up with a number of other organizations and the work they had done. So we lined it up with the FAB standards and measures, which hopefully you all know FAB, that is the accrediting body for health departments. So this is their accreditation criteria. These are their domains all the way on the left. And then many of you are familiar with Council of Linkages core competencies. And so we lined them up. ASTO Public Health WINS was a workforce survey for governmental public health looking at training needs. And then ASPPH did 2 reports a couple of years ago looking at what the MPH should be and what employers are looking for. It's the Blue Ribbon report and the Framing the Future MPH report. And as you can see, there is just so much similarity between all these works. And it's just really exciting that there's synergy going on like I've never seen in this field. And we all seem to be headed in the right direction or the same direction. And you know, I just think really bodes well for not just made us feel good about what we'd done, because we felt like we must have gotten at least part of this right. Otherwise, we wouldn't look so similar. But I think it's just really exciting for the field, as there seems to be a lot of agreement what's needed for the public health workforce. And then finally, when SEAF released their new criteria last November, we quickly lined our domains up with the SEAF foundational competency domains. And as you can see, again, lots of similarities. So we were relieved. I don't know what would happen if we were on a very different page than Steve, but we're not, so I'm not going to worry about that scenario. But there is, like I said, quite a lot of similarity. So this MBPG now is in pretty much the same boat as ASPPH. So MBPG cannot produce its own study guide, but partner organizations can. Anybody out there could create a study guide. But we're going to follow very much the same process because we want to use the similar process for developing example questions as the MBPG would use to develop actual questions. Okay, so one thing right now that both organizations are doing, the MBPG has already started, and now that's one of the first things that hopefully you all will be able to help with is writing standardized questions for the study guide. So we do have a lot of questions, I think, that are going to be, that are in the current study guide that we will be able to reuse in the new study guide. They're still relevant. The field didn't completely change. One of the first things we're going to have this group do is do a review and map the current study guide questions into the new content outline, because we have to figure out where our gaps are. Where are we missing questions? And some of our questions were written quite a while ago in the study guide, and I think need to be cleaned up anyways, and we've learned a lot since then. But one of our first steps has to just be take an inventory. So what I'm going to show you is the MBPG has an item bank of all the questions that have ever been written that are usable. And so last summer, the MBPG started mapping those questions to the new content outline. And I assume for the ASPPH study guide, it's going to look somewhat similar. So what this slide shows you is the surplus we have for tasks, or the, not even deficit, but just the lack of tasks we have for some tasks. So all the way on the right, this little guy out here, we have a task in the new content outline in the actual CPH exam that has 114 standardized questions that would apply to it. I don't know what it is. I need to look it up. So we certainly won't be writing any new questions. The MVP won't be writing any new questions for that task for a very long time. And the MVPG has a really big item bank. It's, I don't know, 3,000 items or something. So that's why these numbers are pretty high in some cases. And so they're quite a few tasks have lots of questions. So the MVPG won't even look at these for a while. They review them when they go in the form, but we won't be writing questions on them. And then this is kind of, this is a pretty decent place to be all the way in the left corner because you have some questions. You have multiple questions for each task, but you don't have a huge inventory. And then this is really where the MVPG is focusing right now, is the number of tasks. Like we have 26 tasks, for example, that have no questions that easily map to it. And so the MVPG just did a round of item writing and asked the item writers to write tasks or questions for these particular tasks. So this is where the MVPG is focused. So we're basically going to do the exact same process for the study guide. So after you all get a little item writing training, courtesy of our testing partner, PSI, then we're going to start reviewing. We're not going to start writing just yet. We're going to start reviewing questions that are in the current study guide. And then on these weekly calls, you all will edit the questions, talk about the questions, and then either throw them out. Some just aren't worth salvaging. They don't fit anymore. You'll tell us if they should be salvaged, where they fit. And then at the end of this whole process, then we'll know where do we need to write new questions. And then that's when their item writing will kick in. I think maybe December was when we indicated that would start. Okay, so inventory first and then new questions. And I think I'll skip this. So a couple things I didn't mention. The new CPH exam will launch January 2019. And so in a perfect world, we'd love to have the new study guide available spring of 2018. So we looked at the questions I don't have a slide of it readily available on that, but I would say about 90% of the content in the current CPH exam is going to translate into the new CPH exam. So it's not going to be an entirely new exam. In fact, it's not. There's a lot of the questions are just going to carry over, about 90% of them. However, you saw the new framework. It looks so different than what we have now. So I feel like even though folks would probably be fine whether they took it in 2018 or 2019, I don't think there will be a huge difference in performance. I think people are going to be really nervous, and if they're planning on taking it 2019, I think they're going to want to have a lot of time to study, because the perception is going to be, it's going to be a very different exam. And so we'd like to give folks as much time as possible to prepare. So our target is spring of 2018. But we will get started and see how it goes. Okay, so our study guide. So right now, our study guide is sort of a hybrid. There's a lot of written material, then there's sample questions and resources. And we're considering some new ideas, and part of the reason why you could see at the bottom of this slide is that APHA, and I think this is great, but APHA is going to develop a study guide on its own. They're working with University of South Florida faculty to develop the study guide, and my understanding is it's going to be much more written based, so they'll have chapters on each of the new domains. And that's great. We think there should be lots of study guides. So I really want to encourage that. In fact, I'm helping them as much as I'm allowed to get going and get started. But our thought is we don't probably want to directly compete with them and have two very, very similar resources. And that if there is a need, if there's the opportunity to fill another need, we should probably go in that direction, so that, you know, candidates have two great resources that are not completely identical. And so that's one thing that we'll start talking about as we get into the process is, you know, what could we do? What really should be the focus of the study guide? Should we have written, you know, summaries of each of the domains? Or do we make it more, you know, interactive? Do we have discussion boards for examinees to talk with each other about, you know, areas where they have questions? One question in the survey that you all filled out, I asked if you'd be interested in being on camera. So could we have like some opportunities where the candidate answers the question and then a sample question and then a video pops up and maybe one of you are on camera and you explain, you know, why the correct answer is correct. So we're really considering some ideas to make the ASPPH study guide interactive. So, and I'm sorry, I know I keep saying me and R, and I'm tripping over myself because I'm the president of the MBPG, but right now I'm wearing my ASPPH hat. I also work at ASPPH, so sometimes I forget who I am. Like I said, first step of the process is to, after you all go through some item writing training, we'll start to do an inventory cleanup of all the study guide questions. We probably have about 400 to get through in the study guide materials right now. Then once we have that inventory done, then we'll make item writing assignments for those of you that said you'd be interested in writing items. And once you submit those, then we're going to do group reviews together, and you're going to get online together, and we won't show your name, don't worry, but we'll decide which new items you know, fit in the new study guide. So let's see. Hopefully you all got were able to get into the ASPPH study guide to see what we're doing now. But keep in mind, it's built a number of years ago. You can just tell by the format, and we are thinking about changing a lot about it. So, but I just thought it'd be good for you to be able to go in and poke around if you wanted to. I guess last slide I'm going to show you, and then I'll just see if we have any questions. Last slide is just if it piqued your interest at all about the survey and the survey responses. We actually made our, the MVPGs made the job task analysis data available. So especially those of you that if you're faculty and you have doctoral students, you know, this is a great opportunity for them to do some work on what the public health workforce is doing. And there's a lot of attributes associated with the survey responses, work setting and titles, education, et cetera. So you can just take a look at our website, and we'll make this available upon request. Okay, so what we're going to do, sorry, you're going to see my browser, maybe. It's going to show, no, I didn't want to open my email. One moment. Oh, here it is. Okay, let's go here. All right, so real quick, I'm just going to show you the new content outline. Content outline. All right, so you all can take a look at this. I think it was in the materials as well. So here are the new, like I mentioned, the new domains. Here they are. We decided we had some pretty lengthy discussions about how to weight, because the different domains now have different number of tasks. And, you know, people have opinions about what's more important, but we decided in the absence of any evidence that one domain should be bigger than the other, for now, we had to start with equal. And we might find over time that one domain really warrants more questions than others, but right now it's going to be equal weighting. So if you want to take a look later, so these are essentially the domains, and you can see just the very descriptive nature of the tasks within each of those domains. And as I mentioned, we have presented and presented and presented on this, and overall, it seems to resonate. I'm really excited about this. We just get such a positive response, and when I present in front of APHA affiliates or like the Public Health Nursing Association, there's a lot of head nodding, and folks seem to think that this really looks about right. They don't necessarily do everything, but they see a lot of what they do in our content outline. I don't know if you'd exactly say that about the current content outline, because it's topics, not tasks. So we're pretty excited about it. And just an FYI, we know we didn't get it perfect the first time. So every 5 years, credentialing organizations are supposed to do a new job task analysis, because it's never perfect and the field evolves. So sometime next year, we're going to have to start thinking about another job task analysis, which will just improve on what we have now. So if you notice anything doesn't look quite right, feel free to send me a suggestion, and we will put it in our notes. And then when we pull the committee back together, we'll certainly incorporate suggestions into the new process. Okay, so that's all I had to share, but I want to stop just for a moment and see if you all have any questions.
Well, it seems pretty clear to me. I'm just curious about next steps and the schedule in terms of how we'll proceed.
So those of you that responded to the SurveyMonkey should have gotten a whole bunch of calendar invites. There was 2 recurring calendar invitations, and Danny Breidenbach's going to do item writer training on the 23rd of August. But if anybody didn't respond to the SurveyMonkey, if you could please do so, because what it asks is, do you want to write questions? Do you want to review questions? Will you be on camera? Would you help us find resources, etc.? So I kind of need to know specifically what you want to do. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, just send me a note. I'll give you my email at the end, and I'll resend you the email that had the SurveyMonkey link in it. But as soon as you fill out the SurveyMonkey link, you'll get a series of calendar invites. Okay, any other questions? Okay, yes, somebody just asked if you're not able to participate on August 23rd. We're not going to have another item writing training live because it tends to be pretty standard, and we always archive our trainings. So what I'll do is right after the training, we'll send out a link so that you can just review it. And certainly if you have specific questions, you can get in touch with our psychometrician we're working with, but we will record the training. Okay. All right, well, I think we'll stop there. I'll let you have the rest of your afternoon back. But again, I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you all being willing to participate in the process, and really think it's going to be a lot of fun. So you will hear from me soon. And like I said, my email address is afoster@nbphe.org. So just send me an email if you need a link to the SurveyMonkey. That'll get you started. All right. Thank you, everybody. Take care.